By community request, today I took a look at Starscape. Starscape is not a terrible game, not by any rights, but it has some major glaring issues that I feel like there's no way they couldn't have known about before they made the game, and it's almost as if they were given a blueprint of exactly what not to do and then followed it to the letter, which I'm not entirely sure how that happens, but I'll be talking about it more in depth as the video goes on. Before we talk about the problems I had with the game though, I think it's only fair to talk about positives, because there's plenty good to talk about when it comes to Starscape. I think the easiest thing to point to is obviously the overall atmosphere of the game and how it feels to play. It's very clear that Starscape was going for a massive universe vibe, and I think when it comes to that, they succeeded with flying colors. When you're in space, it really genuinely feels like you are in space. It's not one of those games where it's sort of trying to pretend that there are these massive distances between areas. There really is these massive distances between areas. And when something like that is just simply not gonna pan out because Roblox can't handle it, that's where things can get separated by a load screen, which is more than understandable. The amount of effort it must have taken to put in this many different planets is strictly incredible. On that note, when it comes to immersion, I get to talk about the sound design and the music, which again, basically fits the game to a T. I don't think that games get enough credit when it comes to sound design especially, and this is one of those games where they absolutely hit it out of the park. Everything fits where it should be, it doesn't feel like there's any missing sounds, and well, it's just really, really well done. The tutorial, which for a game like this is very, very important, considering that it's incredibly easy for you to potentially get lost in all of the menus and complexities of the game, actually does a very serviceable job of explaining exactly what you need to know about the game. There were a very, very minute few things that weren't covered in the tutorial that were in the game, but I think those are things that are very reasonable to assume that you would be able to figure out as you play. I think that the entire idea of the faction system and the idea that there's this huge ongoing three-front war between the three main factions of the game is really cool, and the fact that you can pick and take sides is also awesome. It's one of those things that people thought they were going to get out of No Man's Sky and then just sort of didn't when the game came out. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself when it comes to No Man's Sky though. Don't worry, the comparisons to that game will definitely not stop here. And finally, the overall visual fidelity of the game is really, really solid. Just the look of your ship being able to jump into hyperspace is so cool. But unfortunately, blowing through a lot of those positive things that I have to say about the game, I can do that relatively quickly, and then the problems crop up right afterwards. The biggest issue with Starscape is the easiest one to identify by literally anybody who has booted the game for more than 5 minutes. And that problem is as wide as an ocean, as deep as a puddle. You may have heard this sentiment before on something such as No Man's Sky. And based on the fact that No Man's Sky came out in 2016 and this game started its development in 2017, well, I think it's very, very safe to assume that they took a lot of inspiration from that game. Now, unfortunately, unlike that game, which is improved substantially and is now heralded as one of the greatest success stories and redemption stories of gaming as a whole, well, Starscape was basing seemingly a lot of its systems off of the original No Man's Sky. And because of that, yeah, we're in trouble. So as it turns out, when you put in 8 bajillion different star systems into your game, it's very, very hard to make them all unique. And in this game, it's impossible. What this very quickly leads to is every single star system feeling the exact same. If I gave you a screenshot of star systems from 4 different corners of the map, I guarantee you that you would not be able to tell me which is which. You just wouldn't be able to do it. And the reason that you can't is because obviously they just reused a whole lot of assets in order to copy paste different star systems over and over and over again. And while there are definitely minor things that set these star systems apart, at the end of the day, they all feel identical. And so that then begs the question, if they're all going to feel identical, then what was the point of having so many in the first place? And this is the exact crime that No Man's Sky committed and got a shitload of flack for. There is just simply no point of having so many planets if there's no reason to actually go to any of them. To reference another game that also ate this criticism really bad, we can look at a game like Starfield. That came out relatively recently and faced a lot of the same criticisms that No Man's Sky did. They were like, look at all of our planets, procedural generation, there's so many places to go, except for, there's no reason to go there. Starscape is further hindered by the fact that, unlike those two games, you can't actually go to any of the planets. It is strictly a space game, which in of itself isn't necessarily a problem, but again, if 80% of your game is just empty space, and the actual playable space all looks identical to each other, it gets very grating very quickly. Now, another massive problem, and definitely the largest issue in my opinion for the entire game, is the way that they handled traversal. And again, it's a problem that directly stems from the fact that they decided to make this massive game with so many places to go, but no reason to actually go there, which leads you to just blow through areas without a care in the world. And to give you an example of what I'm talking about and really hit it home why this sucks so bad, if I go to the Citadel, the starting area of the game, and decide to get a quest to fight some pirates, I'll go up to the Citadel, talk to the Corsair manager, and get the quest. After I've done so, it tells me to go to a specific star system. So I pull up my map, and generally speaking from here, it's 2 star systems away. So I have to run down, jump into my ship, leave the space station, and then travel not to the star system I actually want to go to, but a star system which is next to the one I need to go to. Because the game does not allow you to directly travel from one star system to another if they're not connected by these specific routes. So this means that I'm now traveling to this next star system that I have no reason to go to, and then I have to wait through a loading screen, and when I get out of the loading screen, what do I do the second that the load screen ends? I go to my map, click the star system I actually wanted to go to in the first place, then hit travel, and guess what? We're in another load screen. I just went through a load screen just so that way I could navigate some menus and enter another load screen. I'll tell you what this is. It's a waste of my time. There is zero reason why this needs to be this way. Absolutely zero. And I already hear the comments. There are people that are going to say, Eclipse, there are warp relays, and you can use them to travel across multiple star systems at once, and this alleviates the problem. And my response to that is, no it doesn't. That's a band-aid solution to a problem that the game itself created. You can't create a problem and then give players a band-aid solution and go, it's better. No, the game, objectively speaking, would have just been better if you could travel where you wanted to go straight away, but you can't. Or it would have been better if the galaxy or universe as a whole was smaller, so that way you didn't have to traverse through so many different load screens just to get to more load screens. Anyways, the point is I have to travel 2 load screens to get to where I want to go, then I play the game, and then it wants me to return to where I came from to report my success. Oh, you've got to be fucking kidding me. That means that I have to travel back through the same load screens that I just did, get back to the space station, climb all the way up, go back to the NPC I got the quest from, and finally I've completed the quest. And if I want to take a job like that again, I have to do all of that busy work again. Now, you may be thinking, if you haven't played the game before, or even if you have and you just haven't been thinking very hard about it, that this doesn't seem that bad and that maybe I'm nitpicking. So okay, if I'm nitpicking, here's some numbers for you. When I was doing one of these quests earlier on, when I left the space station and got to where I actually needed to go, it took me roughly 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Then when I was actually there playing the game and fighting against enemy pirates, that was 1 minute and 30 seconds. Uh-oh. And then, on the way back and all the way up to the quest giver I needed to go to, that took 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Doing some very rudimentary math, we get to roughly 3/4 traveling and 1/4 playing the game. That is a horrendous ratio. That's awful. Do you really want to spend 3/4 of your gaming experience not playing and just watching your ship go? Maybe if you're a Souls RNG player, but for the rest of us, no, that sucks. Now, the other major flaw that I think the game suffers from, and this also might potentially stem from my own inexperience, so I'm sure people will correct me if I'm wrong, considering that I only played the game for probably roughly an hour and 45 minutes, is the fact that space games have a really hard time doing space combat that's simultaneously fun and also fair. And the reason that this is the case is because, generally speaking, space doesn't have a whole lot of places to hide or avoid stuff. You see, if you're playing a flight combat game that takes place on a planet, generally speaking, you're going to have plenty of different things to fly through or use to evade enemy fire, whether it be buildings, mountains, etc. When you go into space, however, because of the massive distances and just the larger scale of things, generally speaking, there's not a whole lot of cover per se. And what this leads to is this sort of action figure smash against each other type gameplay loop where you have a bunch of shields and a bunch of health, and they have a bunch of shields and they have a bunch of health, and whoever has the higher number wins. Because realistically speaking, the mechanics to avoid enemy fire are borderline non-existent. The mechanics in order to hide from enemy fire and potentially regain your health or shields is borderline non-existent. And all of those things also apply to the enemies as well. I had a perfect showcasing of this when I got into an area where I was very clearly out of my depth. You'd think because I was in an asteroid field, maybe I would be able to use the asteroids to my advantage when I realized that there was just no way I was going to win this fight. But no, hiding around the asteroids did next to nothing and I exploded and died anyway. This was one of those areas of the game where the game clearly didn't want me to be here yet because my ship wasn't equipped for it. And no matter what I did here, I was doomed to get killed. Now, as I said, I don't think this is necessarily relegated directly to Starscape. I think it's something that a lot of these types of games suffer from, and this is just yet another one to add to the list. Space combat is really hard to get right in terms of this regard, and so I don't have a whole lot of faith in really any game to get this right. But whether or not I have faith in games to get it right doesn't matter here. We're talking about whether or not it's good, and the fact of the matter is, having a fight that you just can't win no matter what you do because your stats just aren't good enough is pretty lame. Especially when it seems like the bones are there to have a more skill-based thing where you could potentially overcome the odds, but here, that's just impossible. And on a final note, I gotta talk about the goddamn sensitivity again. I'm gonna start bringing this up in every game that does this because I'm so over it. Guys, Roblox has a default sensitivity. I set my sensitivity on Roblox to be the sensitivity that I want it to be, and then games like this decide, fuck you, I'm slowing it down to a crawl. Why? Why do you guys do this? And this time around, I couldn't even find the sensitivity slider in the settings. If it's there, my bad. But if you're not even gonna have a setting for it, why even fuck with it? Just leave it alone, guys. Overall, at the end of the day, Starscape is one of those games that I think the developers very clearly bit off way more than they could chew. But to be perfectly honest with you, despite the fact that they clearly bit off way more than they could chew, I think for what they have here, it's a pretty valiant effort. I think it's one of those games that if it had more support behind it and a more cohesive vision of what they really wanted this game to be, then it could really succeed. But unfortunately, we're on the Roblox platform, and this is a platform where experimental games like this get thrown into the dirt and buried, while shitty games like Fish and Souls RNG flourish. So while I wish the people behind this project the best, the reality is I can't really see it panning out. I know that's a bit of a doomer take, but hey, I'm a realist. Anyways, if you like space games, I feel like there's no reason not to give this game a try. It's free to play, for God's sake, so you might as well. Naturally, I'll be leaving the link in the description, so if you want to check it out, it'll be down there. But with all that being said, I'm wrapping up here. If you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like and subscribe. If you didn't, don't. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys next time.